Hey everybody, this is a brief video meant to offer you a primer for reading the Brandt piece this week, which will also give you tools for reading other scholarly articles both in this course and in other courses that you're taking right now. I know last week that you read the Bunn piece, How to Read Like a Writer. That piece was tailored to student readers, so I imagine that was fairly easy for you to get through. The Brandt piece as a work of scholarship is a different kind of writing, a different kind of animal. So we're just going to be talking very briefly about ways to approach the Brandt piece. Here are some skills for active reading when you're reading scholarly articles, and this applies to all kinds of scholarly articles, not just the Brandt. The first thing I would suggest is to annotate anything that you're reading. Since you're most likely reading on your computer screen, I have some suggestions that include using a PDF reader of kind. So I really encourage you to highlight things as you go along. Here's just a copy of my own PDF of the Brandt piece. I always highlight things as I read along. You can circle, write comments and questions, and of course save the PDF to your files. So you always have that to go back to. And I just want to pull up some other different PDF readers so you can see how these functions work if you're not familiar with them. So if you're using Adobe Reader, for example, you can use the highlighter feature right here and insert sticky notes or comments using those things. If you are using the preview application on Macs, you can go up to the top here and there's a highlighter button right here. You can also click this little pencil and a bunch of tools come up. There's a little pencil here. You can add text. So these are all ways that you can use your PDF readers to annotate the text that you're reading, which I think is a really important way to stay engaged as you're reading and, again, to pursue active reading strategies as you're going through. The second thing I would recommend is to paraphrase and summarize. This is something you can do as you go through, but sometimes it's the most helpful to do this after you finish the entire piece. After finishing the article, ask yourself, what were the main points that stuck out to me, and make a list. That's a good way of synthesizing what you just read and kind of forces you to articulate some difficult ideas. So that's another thing that I would encourage. Finally, all scholarly writing is entering a conversation. There is some kind of scholarly conversation going on that this author is now entering. And that's a really good tip to keep in mind when you encounter a new scholarly piece of writing, because you want to ask yourself, what is that conversation? How is this author entering that conversation? What discipline or field is this person even a part of? So this first question I have here is, what discipline or field is Brandt in? How can we figure this out? In this case, I would say take a look at the name of the journal. This is the first page of your PDF, and you can see she's writing this piece in the journal College Composition and Communication. So we know that she's interested in the study of composition as a scholarly field, or in other words, writing studies, as it often is referred to. So looking at what the journal is called is really useful. That helps us determine the audience of who Brandt is talking to. And then secondly, what scholarly conversation is Brandt entering? What's her reason for writing this piece? How does she seek to make a change? Or how does she seek to introduce a new idea that people haven't thought of? This is also something that you should be looking for in the reading. Sometimes this kind of information shows up in the introduction to an essay. Sometimes it comes a little bit later on. And that's the case in the Brandt piece, that it's a few paragraphs into the essay when she finally addresses what scholarly conversation she's entering. So I'm going to turn now to that moment that I've highlighted here, page 166, paragraphs 2 and 3. Where we can see how she's entering a specific scholarly conversation in this piece, Sponsors of Literacy. As you'll see in this first paragraph, the field of writing studies has had much to say about individual literacy development. So she's talking to the field of writing studies, and she's saying, we've talked a lot about literacy. We know that you and I in this course are just about to talk about literacy, and now in this piece we're talking about sponsors of literacy. Brandt is beginning this piece by saying, we actually know a lot about literacy because the field of writing studies has talked about it so extensively. In the middle of this paragraph, we start to see where she's kind of cleaving a way forward for her to introduce a new idea. Less easily and certainly less steadily have we been able to relate what we see, study, and do to these larger contexts of profit-making and competition. So we already see that Brandt wants to situate literacy in relationship to profit-making or economic forces and competition. This is a connection she wants to draw. Okay, moving forward to the second paragraph where it becomes a little bit clearer. This essay does not presume to overcome the analytical failure completely, but it does offer a conceptual approach that begins to connect literacy as an individual development to literacy as an economic development, at least as the two have played out over the last 90 years or so. So literacy, this practice of learning to read and to write, or to read and to write in very specific ways, is connected to economics, is connected to larger economic forces about what kinds of writing and reading are profitable and not profitable. And as she goes on, it's also connected to political forces. What do political regimes and political organizations value as good writing and reading, and what do they say is bad writing and reading? All of these forces are influencing how literacy is shaped and how we become literate and how we pass literacy on to others. So I think that's really important to keep in mind as you make your way through this piece, is that Brandt is always talking about literacy in relationship to economic forces and political forces, that those larger forces are shaping how we learn to read and write, and also what we learn to read and write. This will be really crucial to this whole notion of sponsors of literacy. Sponsors that both pass literacy on to us, but also sometimes pay for that literacy or fund that literacy, shaping that literacy through their own economic interests, through their own interests in profit or interests in political power, and so forth. So I think that's a really crucial context for approaching Brandt's ideas, is remembering that literacy is always in relationship to economic forces. This is a connection that you're going to investigate a lot more thoroughly in your discussion posts, where you discuss Brandt's ideas. I think that's all you need to know for now.